She glanced at Dio, who was already reading a book, relaxed and oblivious to the strain she was under. Dio, I'm struggling to keep up with everything, she said quietly, trying not to sound accusatory. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. If it's too much, maybe you should consider stepping back from work. Isn't our family more important? Tola felt a pang in her heart. Tola's alarm buzzed at 5 a.m., pulling her from a shallow sleep. She dragged herself out of bed, her body already feeling the weight of the long day ahead. She moved quietly so she wouldn't wake Dio or the kids, and made her way to the kitchen to begin her morning routine. In the kitchen, she started preparing breakfast, quickly scrambling eggs, boiling water for tea, and setting out bowls for cereal. She glanced at the clock every minute, knowing that time was her greatest enemy. Her children, Bisi and Tunde, were still fast asleep. Bisi at 8 was independent enough to dress herself and gather her school things, but Tunde was just 5, and getting him ready in the morning was still a challenge all on its own. While the eggs sizzled in the pan, she moved to the children's room to wake them up. Bisi, Tunde, it's morning, let's get up, she whispered, gently patting their shoulders. Bisi stretched, rubbing her eyes, but Tunde just rolled over, mumbling that he wanted to sleep more. Tola sighed, feeling the pressure build. She had only a short window to get them fed, dressed and ready for school before she had to rush off to her own job as a marketing executive. As she helped Tunde pull on his shirt, she glanced at her husband Dio, who was still asleep. Dio was always quick to tell her that he believed a mother's job was to take care of her children herself, without outside help. She thought back to the many conversations she had had with him, trying to convince him to let them hire someone to help out. Dio, I think we need a nanny, or at least someone who can come in a few times a week, she had suggested, feeling the strain of handling everything alone. But Dio had been firm. Our children should know their mother's touch. He had insisted, I don't want strangers in my home. So here she was, juggling a demanding job and the full responsibilities of running their household, with no relief in sight. Dio's belief that she should be able to handle everything on her own weighed heavily on her. She finished helping Tunde dress and led both children to the kitchen table, placing their plates in front of them. Eat up quickly, okay? We need to be out of the door soon, she said, her voice steady but hurried. She barely had time to sip her own tea before she was back on her feet, cleaning up after them, packing their school bags, and glancing at the clock again. Her stomach twisted as she realized she was already running late for work. As she ushered the kids into the car and drove them to school, Tola's mind raced with the tasks awaiting at the office. Her job was important to her, something she had worked so hard to achieve, and she didn't want to risk losing it all. But her career was beginning to suffer. She was often late, missing meetings and arriving too tired to focus. And each time her performance slipped, she felt the disappointment in her boss's eye. At the end of another long day, after picking up the kids from school, handling dinner, bathing them, and bedtime routines, she collapsed into the bed, only to feel a familiar frustration gnawing at her. She glanced at Dio, who was already reading a book, relaxed and oblivious to the strain she was under. Gathering her courage, she decided to bring it up again. Dio, I'm struggling to keep up with everything, she said quietly, trying not to sound accusatory. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. If it's too much, maybe you should consider stepping back from work. Isn't our family more important? Tola felt a pang in her heart. She knew her family was important, but her job wasn't just about money. It was about her dreams and her ambitions, something she had worked tirelessly to build. Dio, I've always wanted to be a career woman, she said softly. I want to be there for Bisi and Tunde, but my job is also part of me too. I don't want to give that up. Dio shrugged, clearly unconvinced. A good wife knows her priorities, he replied, before turning back to his book, as if the conversation was over. Tola lay awake long after he had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering how much longer she could keep up this balancing act. She had tried everything, waking up earlier, staying up later, even skipping meals to get more things done, but she was stretched too thin, and it was beginning to show. In the quiet of the night, she resolved that she wouldn't give up on her dreams, no matter how hard it got. But as she closed her eyes, a single thought echoed in her mind: how long can I keep this up? Tola's days grew longer and her nights even shorter. She barely had time to catch her breath between the endless demands of her family and her job. Each evening, after the children had been tucked into bed, she would drag herself back to the kitchen to wash the dishes, clean up, and prepare things for the next day. It was often past midnight before she allowed herself to rest, and even then, her mind raced with a to-do list that seemed to grow by the hour. One morning, as she woke up to the relentless beeping of her alarm, she felt a deep ache in her bones, the kind of exhaustion that wasn't just physical but emotional. Still, she pushed herself out of bed, glancing over at Dayo, who continued to sleep peacefully. She envied him in that moment, how he could rest so easily, seemingly unaffected by the weight that pressed down on her shoulders. As she shuffled into the kitchen to start breakfast, she felt a wave of frustration rise within her. Why did it all have to fall on her? Why couldn't he see how hard she was struggling? Later that evening, she finally gathered the courage to bring it up to him again. She waited until the children were asleep and the house was quiet. Dayo was seated comfortably on the couch, watching his favorite TV show. Taking a deep breath, she sat down beside him. Dayo, I really need to talk to you, she began, her voice trembling slightly. He looked over at her, raising an eyebrow. Tola, what is it? She gathered her thoughts, trying to choose her words carefully. Dayo, I am exhausted. Between the kids, the housework, and my work, I feel like I'm drowning. I need help. Maybe we could think about hiring someone to help with the cleaning or looking after the kids at least. Dayo sighed, his gaze fixed on the television. Tola, we've been over this. I provide for the family financially. That's my role. You manage the house and the children. That's yours. But Dayo, is not just about managing the house, Tola replied, struggling to keep the frustration out of her voice. I'm working too. I'm contributing financially as well. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing everything on my own. He shrugged, barely glancing at her. If it's too much, maybe you should think about stepping back from work, like I said. You're the one who wants a career. I didn't ask for that. His words hit her like a slap. She felt her heart sink, her hopes deflated by the casual dismissal. It was as if he couldn't or wouldn't understand the weight she carried. She wanted to scream, to make him see the toll this life was taking on her, but she knew it would be pointless. Dayo had made up his mind. For a moment, she just sat there in silence, her gaze fixed on the floor. She felt an ache in her heart, a sense of loneliness that she couldn't shake. Finally, she stood up, forcing a small smile as she whispered, "Good night, Dayo." He didn't respond, too absorbed in his show. Tola retreated to her bedroom, feeling more alone than ever. The following morning, Tola went through her usual routine, preparing breakfast and getting the kids ready for school. Bisi, her daughter, noticed the tired look in her mother's eyes and tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, are you okay?" Bisi asked, her young face filled with concern. Tola forced a smile, bending down to kiss her daughter on the forehead. "I'm fine, my love. I'm just a little bit tired." As she dropped the kids off at school and headed to work, Tola felt the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her harder than ever. At the office, her boss and co-workers noticed her weary appearance, and her boss gave her a concerned look as she handed in her late report. "Is everything alright, Tola?" her boss asked gently. She nodded, forcing another smile. "Yes, just a busy time at home, but I will manage." She wasn't sure if she believed her own words. One chilly morning, Tola felt an overwhelming wave of fatigue as she tried to get out of bed. She had barely slept, her body weighed down by the endless routine, but this was different. A dizziness overtook her and she had to sit back down, taking deep breaths to steady herself. She shook her head, chalking it up to exhaustion from her demanding schedule. Throughout the day, the tiredness lingered, creeping up on her even as she pushed through her tasks. By the afternoon, she could barely keep up her eyes open, and her stomach churned with a queasy sensation. Concerned, she decided it was time to see a doctor. She figured he must advise some vitamins, or at worst, suggest a short leave from work. As she sat in the doctor's office, her heart pounded. When the doctor walked in with her test results, she could tell from his face that he had something surprising to say. "Congratulations, Mrs. Tola," he began with a gentle smile. "You are pregnant." Tola's mind spun. Pregnant? She hadn't been expecting this. She sat in stunned silence as the doctor continued talking, but his words seemed to blur together. She could hardly process what he was saying. All she could think about was the mountain of responsibilities already on her shoulders. Her job, her 2 children, her home, and Dayo's complete lack of support. On the drive home, Tayo's mind raced. Another baby would mean even less sleep, more housework, and an unending list of demands. She felt her chest tighten, the weight of the news pressing down on her. How was she supposed to handle another child when she was already drowning? That evening, Tola decided to tell Dayo. She tried to keep her tone calm, hoping he would understand her concerns. As he settled down in the living room after dinner, she took a deep breath and joined him. "Dayo, I went to the doctor's office today," she began softly, her hands clasped tightly together. "He confirmed that I am pregnant." Dayo's face lit up in surprise. "Pregnant? Well, that's a wonderful news, Tola," he exclaimed, a wide smile spreading across his face. But Tola hesitated. "Dayo, I'm a little worried. We already have Bisi and Tunde, and with how things have been lately, I don't know if I'm ready for another child. It's been hard managing everything as it is." His smile faded instantly, and his expression grew cold. "How can you say that, Tola?" he replied, his tone sharp. "This is our child, a blessing from God. You are supposed to be happy about this." "I know, Dayo," she said, her voice trembling, "but I'm already stretched thin. I'm just asking you to consider how this will affect everything. Our lives, our kids, my job." Dayo cut her off, his gaze hardening. "So what are you saying, Tola? That you don't want our child?" "No, I didn't mean it like that," she replied, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I just need you to understand how overwhelming this is for me." He shook his head dismissively. "You are keeping this baby, Tola. End of discussion." His words hit her like a blow. She knew there was no use arguing further. Dayo already made up his mind, and his lack of understanding only deepened her feelings of isolation. She felt trapped, burdened by an exhaustion she couldn't escape, and now with a new life growing inside of her, her future seemed even more daunting. That night, as she lay awake beside her sleeping husband, Tola's thoughts swirled. She was carrying a baby, a part of her and Dayo, and while a small part of her was filled with love and wonder, an even larger part was filled with dread. As the weeks passed, Tola's pregnancy progressed, and so did the toll it was taking on her body. She felt constantly fatigued, her energy draining faster each day. Simple tasks like climbing the stairs or bending over to pick up Tunde's toys became monumental challenges. Yet, Dayo's expectations for her remained the same. If anything, he seemed even more demanding, assuming she would push through as she always had. In the mornings, nausea hit her like a wave, forcing her to take deep breaths just to keep herself from collapsing. But there was no one to help. Bisi and Tunde would call for her, needing breakfast, help with their uniforms, or attention for one reason or the other. Every time Tola looked for Dayo, she found him getting ready for work, his face buried in his phone or already on his way out of the door. "Tola, you should rest more," he would say offhandedly whenever he noticed her struggling. Yet, those words were always empty. He never lifted a finger to ease her load. She continued with her tasks, managing the household and children, as if her own exhaustion didn't exist. One evening, after she had finally put the kids to bed, Tola dragged herself to the kitchen to finish washing the dishes and clean up the dinner table. Her back ached, and her swollen feet felt as if they were on fire. By the time she was done, every muscle in her body throbbed with exhaustion. All she wanted was to lie down and closed her eyes. As she entered the bedroom, Dio looked up from his side of the bed. Finally, he muttered, "You know, Tola, we barely spend time together these days. You're either working or complaining about how tired you are." Tola looked at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. She could feel the weight of fatigue pressing down on her, her eyes barely able to stay open. "Dio, I'm doing everything I can," she said, her voice laced with exhaustion. "I am pregnant, I take care of the kids, I take care of the house, I have work, I don't have anything left to myself." Dio's face hardened. "I understand you're tired, Tola, but I am still your husband, don't forget that." Her heart sank. She couldn't find the energy to argue or even explain further. She simply nodded, her body numb, her heart even heavier. With every passing day, the strain deepened, and Tola felt like she was carrying the weight of the world alone. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of stew simmering on the stove as Tola moved slowly from one task to the next, her body heavy with fatigue. Suddenly, a sharp searing pain shot through her abdomen, forcing her to clutch her stomach as a gasp escaped her lips. The pot slipped from her hand, spilling onto the floor. As she doubled over, the pain intensified. She knew something was terribly wrong. "Dio," she managed to call out, her voice trembling with fear. Dio, who was watching television in the living room, rushed to her side. Seeing the look of agony on her face, he quickly realized the gravity of the situation. Without another word, he helped her to the car and drove speedily to the hospital, his face tight with worry as he sped through the streets. Hours passed in the blur of medical voices and the cold, sterile atmosphere of the hospital. Tola lay on the hospital bed, clutching her belly, her mind a whirlwind of dread and hope, clinging to any possibility that her baby might be okay. But as the doctor approached with a grave expression, she felt her heart sink. "Mrs. Tola, I am so sorry," the doctor said gently, his voice soft but firm. "You've suffered a miscarriage." The words echoed in her mind, slicing through her heart like a knife. A sob escaped her lips as she struggled to process the weight of the loss. She felt hollow, as if a piece of her had been ripped away. This was her child, her dear baby, and now gone. Dio stood by her side, silent. She looked at him, hoping for some shared grief, but his face was a cold mixture of anger and hurt. He stared back at her. When they returned home, the atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken pain. Tola sank into the couch, too drained to speak, her heart aching from the emptiness left by the loss. But before she could even begin to grieve, Dio's words hit her like a blow. "This happened because you didn't want the baby," he accused, his tone harsh and unforgiving. "You practically wished it away, and now it has happened." Tola's eyes widened, stunned by the cruelty of his words. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Dio, how could you say that? I was exhausted, yes, but I would never harm my own child," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotions. Dio shook his head, looking away. "You weren't ready to be a mother to another child, and now look at what has happened." Tola's heart shattered at the accusation, each word deepening the wound left by her loss. She could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, but she fought to keep them back, unwilling to break down in front of him. She had been prepared to love this child despite her exhaustion and doubt. But now, not only had she lost her baby, she was also bearing the weight of blame from the one person who was supposed to support her. In silence, she rose from the couch, retreating to their bedroom to grieve alone. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating her as she lay on the bed, her hand resting over her empty womb. The days turned into weeks, and the distance between Tola and Dio only grew wider. Dio's cold, unyielding silence felt like a wall around her, shutting her out completely. Every time she looked at him, she saw anger in his eyes, a silent accusation that pierced her heart all over again. His words from that night replayed in her mind, adding weight to the grief she was already carrying. Tola tried to stay strong, holding herself together for Bisi and Tunde, but every small reminder of the baby she had lost tore her apart inside. She hadn't just lost a child, she felt like she had lost her husband too. Dayo's coldness was unbearable, making her feel like a stranger in her own home. He moved around the house like a ghost, his presence only adding to the heaviness that lingered in the air. One evening, as the kids were asleep, Tola couldn't bear the silence any longer. She found him sitting alone in the living room, his face hard and distant as he stared at the floor. Gathering her courage, she stepped forward, breaking the quiet. Dayo, she began, I know you're hurting, but you're not the only one who lost a child. He didn't look at her, but his expression darkened. Are you saying that doesn't make it your fault? Her heart clenched, but she took a deep breath, determined to be heard. Dayo, I may not have been ready for another child, but I will never harm our own baby. You have no idea how much pain I feel. It is my body that went through this. I am the one carrying this loss. Dayo's jaw tightened as he looked away, his face a mixture of anger and sorrow. He was still silent, refusing to meet her gaze, but Tola's frustration and sadness bubbled over. How can you be so cruel? She whispered, her voice breaking. We were supposed to be in this together, yet you've left me to grieve alone. Don't you think I'm hurting too? A flicker of emotion crossed his face. He quickly buried it. Maybe if you had been more prepared to welcome our child, things would have been different. Tola felt like she has been slapped. The weight of his accusations was suffocating, and she realized that no words could soften the bitterness he was clinging to. Heartbroken, she turned, left him sitting alone, retreating to the bedroom where she could finally release the tears she has been holding back. In the quiet of the room, Tola felt the depth of her isolation. She was carrying a burden too heavy for one person, yet the one person who should have been by her side is the same one who has constantly been pushing her further away. 2 months after the loss, life dealt Dayo a sudden blow. He was laid off from his job. At first, he tried to remain optimistic, convinced he would find another position quickly. But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear that securing a new job would take more time. Financial pressure began to build, and for the first time, Dayo found himself staying home full-time while Tola went to work. The children, Bisi and Tunde, were thrilled to have him around at first, assuming it meant more playtime with Daddy. Dayo struggled to handle even the simplest household tasks. Each morning felt like a mountain he had to climb. As he scrambled to get the kids ready, to make breakfast and keep the house somewhat in order, the demands felt endless, and no matter how hard he tried, things never seemed to go smoothly. Breakfast is born, Daddy, Bisi groaned one morning, poking at the overly crisp toast on her plate. Dayo forced a smile, trying to hide his frustration. It's just a little extra crunchy today, he said, attempting to make a joke. But Bisi sighed, and Tunde shook his head, murmuring, Mommy never burns breakfast. Each task seemed to unravel the next. The laundry piled up faster than he could wash it. Toys and clothes seemed to scatter everywhere, no matter how often he tidied up. The children were always asking for something. Help with their school assignments, help them with snacks, help them with attention, and Dayo quickly realized how relentless it all was. One evening, while he struggled to prepare dinner for the kids, Tola arrived home to a scene of chaos. Dishes cluttered the sink, toys were strewn across the floor. Dayo was trying to cook while Tunde tugged on his leg, whining about wanting a snack before dinner. Tola quietly took in the scene, her expression a mix of understanding and exhaustion. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Dayo finally spoke, his voice low and filled with uncharacteristic humility. Tola, I had no idea it was this hard. The kids, the house, everything. I don't know how you managed all of this, especially while working full-time. Tola glanced at him, a mixture of emotions crossing her face. Relief, sadness, and a hint of validation she hadn't felt in years. Dayo, it wasn't easy, but I didn't have a choice. You left me with no choice. I just wanted some support, even very little from you. Someone to just understand how much it took to keep everything running. Dayo was silent, his thoughts heavy with regret. The children had constantly compared his efforts to Tola's, innocently reminding him, Mommy does it better. He finally understood what Tola had been asking for all along. Not just help, but empathy, a willingness to share the load. From that moment on, Dayo made a conscious effort to improve. He began helping more willingly, stepping up with household chores and taking care of the kids without needing to be asked. He realized that Tola hadn't been seeking perfection, she just wanted partnership, and he was determined to be a better husband and father. But for Tola, the emotional toll of years of neglect and resentment wasn't easily undone. She appreciated Dayo's newfound efforts, but the love and connections they once shared felt buried under too much pain and misunderstanding. As she watched him try to repair the damage, Tola wondered if it was too late for them to find their way back to each other. As weeks went by, Dayo found himself growing more in awe of Tola's resilience. Each day he spent juggling chores and caring for Bisi and Tunde, he became more aware of the immense weight she had carried for so long. He was drained after a few hours of managing the household. Tola had been doing this for years. On top of her demanding job, the reality keeps hitting him hard, and with it, a deep sense of regret settled in his mind. One evening, after a challenging day with the children, Dayo decided to do something different. He knew that words alone weren't enough to show Tola that he had truly changed, so he prepared dinner, making an effort to cook her favorite meal, hoping it would show her that he was serious about making amends. When Tola returned home from work, she looked surprised to see the table neatly set and the aroma of home-cooked meal filling the air. Dayo greeted her with a soft smile and gestured for her to sit down. "Tola, I know words can't undo the years of neglect," he began, his voice laced with remorse. "But I just want to show you that I understand now. I finally see how much you've been doing alone. And I'm sorry. I am sorry for not supporting you when you needed me. I should have been there as your partner, not just as an observer or financial provider." Tola sat in silence, processing his words. A part of her appreciated his honesty, yet another part remained guarded, unwilling to let herself believe that this change would last, because if not for the loss of his job, he would still be ignorant. She had built walls around her heart over the years, each one solidified by countless nights of exhaustion, disappointment, and silent tears. "Dayo," she finally said, her voice steady but tired, "I'm glad you understand now, but it doesn't erase the pain I feel. For so long I felt alone, like I was carrying this entire family on my shoulders while you stood by. I wanted us to share the load, to be a team, to be happy together, but each time I asked for your help, you dismissed me." Dayo nodded, his expression filled with guilt. "I know, and I regret every moment I took for granted. I just want a chance to make things right. I just want to show you that I am here for you now." They ate in silence, and after that, the weight of the conversation settling between them. Dayo had always been confident in his role as a provider, never realizing that true partnership went beyond just financial support. Now, he wanted to prove that he could be more, that he could be the husband and father Tola had always deserved. Over the next few weeks, Dayo continued to put in the effort. He took over the kids' morning routine, made breakfast every day, and managed the laundry without being asked. He even surprised Tola with small gestures like packing lunch for her, tidying up the house, and reading bedtime stories to Bisi and Tunde. For the first time in many years, Tola felt a bit of the weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't need to rush home worrying about chores or staying up late to finish tasks. However, her heart still hesitated to fully embrace this new Dayo. She couldn't ignore the years of emotional neglect she had endured, and a part of her wondered if it was even possible to rebuild the love they once shared. One evening, as they sat quietly after putting the kids to bed, Dayo reached for Tola's hand. She looked at him, surprised by the gentle touch, and saw in his eyes a mix of longing and remorse. "Tola," he whispered, "I miss us. I miss the way we used to be. I know I can't erase the past, but I'm asking if we can try to find our way back to each other." Tola felt a lump in her throat. She had missed them too. The laughter, the companionship, the love, and the intimacy. But she wasn't sure if her heart could open up again so easily. Dayo, we can try, she replied, her voice filled with caution. But it won't be easy. There is a lot we need to work on. We need to work on so many things and it's going to take time. Dayo nodded, squeezing her hand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Tola. I'm not going anywhere this time. In that moment, Tola felt a glimmer of hope. Though she knew the journey to healing would be slow, she decided to take it one day at a time. Dayo's determination to make things right seemed endless. He continued to take on more roles around the house, learning the little details he had once overlooked, how Tola liked her coffee in the mornings, the way the children's routine had to be perfectly timed, and the hidden chaos behind each simple family meal. He even started surprising her with small thoughtful gestures. He would leave her notes in her handbag, pack her a snack for work, and sometimes he would bring flowers, hoping to add a bit of brightness to her day. In the quiet of the night, Tola sat alone in the living room, her mind heavy with thoughts of the life she had built and the pain she had endured. She felt torn. A part of her wanted to stay, to try and mend the pieces of their life together for the sake of their children. But another part, the part that longed for peace and freedom from the years of feeling unappreciated, told her it was time to leave. Her heart raced as she considered both choices, each with its own weight. She thought about Bisi and Tunde, their laughter filling the house, their bright eyes looking up to her, counting on her to hold the family together. Yet, she also imagined a life where she could breathe freely, where the burdens weren't hers to bear alone. That morning, Dayo found her in the living room, her face showing the exhaustion of a night spent wrestling with her thoughts. He sat beside her, sensing the gravity of the moment. Tola, he said softly, his voice thick with regret. I know I've caused you so much pain. I don't expect things to go back exactly the way they were, but I want to make things right. I want to be a better husband and a father. Please, let me. Tola looked at him, her eyes searching his face for the truth behind his words. Dayo, if we are going to make this work, things would have to change. I need you to be a partner, not just in words but in action. I need support, understanding and respect. And I hope that when you finally get a new job, things will not return to the way they used to be. I promise you, Tola, job or no job, I will never take you for granted again. I will help with the kids, with the house, with everything. I know I failed you once, but I want to start all over. If you would let me, please. They spent hours talking, not just about the present, but about the future. They wanted to create a future where their relationship would be built on partnership rather than expectations. They discussed boundaries, the need for open communication, and the importance of making time for each other as equals. Dayo's promises were sincere, but Tola knew it would take time. In the weeks that followed, Dayo made a genuine effort to change. While Tola appreciated his efforts, her heart was cautious. The scars of the past ran deep, and she was afraid of opening herself to more hurts, especially if he finds a new job. She found herself watching him closely, waiting to see if this change was permanent or just a fleeting promise. They continued to work on their relationship, each day a small step forward. Dayo continued to honor his commitment, and little by little, Tola began to feel a shift in her heart. The pain and resentment slowly started to fade, replaced by a cautious hope. She was willing to try, to see if love could grow again in the spaces where trust had been rebuilt. Months later, as they celebrated Bisi's 9th birthday, Tola looked around the room at her family. She saw Dayo laughing with the kids, fully present and engaged in their lives, a partner she could finally rely on. She realized that while the journey had been painful, they had reached a place of understanding and respect. Though the scars of their past would never fully fade, Tola felt ready to give their love a second chance. It wouldn't be easy, but she was willing to try. For the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that they could create a new beginning, built on the foundation of mutual respect and true partnership. Dayo looked into her eyes and whispered, Tola, I love you and I will continue to love you. Tola smiled, seeing the sincerity in his heart. I love you too, Dayo, and I'm ready to make this work. The story reflects the importance of mutual respect, empathy, and partnership in marriage. Tola's journey shows how one-sided responsibilities and lack of support can erode even the strongest bonds, causing pain and resentment. Dayo's realization of Tola's sacrifices demonstrates that understanding another's struggles often requires first-hand experience. It also reveals that genuine change and healing require both commitment and patience. Ultimately, the story highlights that love is not just about fulfilling roles, but about being present and supportive, understanding each other's needs, and building a foundation based on shared responsibilities and respect. Thank you so much for watching this fantastic story on African Stories by Tiana. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing stories. See you next time.